Hello, BookTube. All right, we're continuing with my 12.6K Q&A. I think we're at part 4 here, and we are at turn X 49. Has 2 questions. Number 1, what do you think of the Italian poet Ugo Foscolo? Oh, I've written about Ugo Foscolo many times at great length. I love him. I love his poetry. I love it. In Italy, he's very famous, but in other countries, practically unknown and untranslated. I agree. Was it One World Classic? Did a very pretty, nice volume of Foscolo probably 20, 30 years ago, something like that. You're right. There should be 6 volumes to talk about in English with, loving introductions and lots of notes and whatnot. There isn't. But I love him. Absolutely love him. Tom at Tom LA Books, when he was here for Wine and Calzones, we spent a chunk of time talking about Foscolo. Question number 2, what's your opinion on the prose style of John Henry Newman? I like it very much. I don't know if makes me canceled now in the 21st century, but I like it. Chris Bianchi says, hi Steve, who's your favorite actor and actress of all time? That would be Katharine Hepburn and Peter O'Toole. Question number 2, do you like golden retrievers? What kind of a question is that? Yes, I not only like golden retrievers, I love golden retrievers. And not only do I love golden retrievers, but they love me. And not only do they love me, but they are mine. They are mine. I might be lending them to other people, but they are mine. They are all my babies. There is no breed you could finish that question with. Where I would say anything else, maybe that was a trick as well. Number 3, do you think the art world is dead or relevant today? Oh, people still ask millions of dollars for garbage. They still lord it over other people with nonsense boilerplate. So I don't know that it ever was relevant, but it's still alive. It's still active. How much time do you put aside for television or streaming services compared to reading? Well, I put aside an hour or an hour and a half every night because there's a lot of stuff out there to see. But most of the time, once I get to that time that I put aside, I just go right ahead and fill it in with reading and just put it off to some other night. Let's see here. Steve Bolahan says, when you read on your Kindle, which page display, if any, do you prefer to use? That is, location in chapter, location in book, time left in chapter, time left in book. Usually, if I can't cancel them completely, I don't want any of those notations at all. I don't want anyone looking over my shoulder while I read. But usually, if I can't stop that from happening, then it's, what was the location in book? It's usually the one I go with. But usually, I try to get rid of them. Gerald's Bliss says, hello, Steve. Number 1, you have often indicated that you don't think much of the works of Arthur C. Clarke and Isaac Asimov. Well, okay, that's fair. I agree with you that the latter can seem very gimmicky. They can both seem plenty gimmicky. Who of that generation of sci-fi writers would you recommend? Well, who's in that generation? What are we talking about for generation? Alfred Bester, I'd certainly recommend. Maybe early Robert Silverberg. Does he overlap with them? Close enough to be something like that? I don't know. Bester, I'm pretty sure, would count, and you won't do better than that. Let's see here. Number 2, you have also indicated that you don't have a high opinion of Philip K. Dick. Why is that? Well, that's not a Q&A type question. It's a long discussion, but I have found his books to be poorly written. The imaginative stuff, the plot mechanics, that sort of thing, I can take or leave. I don't have a high standard for that sort of thing. But authors got really good prose, like Alfred Bester, like Robert Silverberg, then I'm willing to put up with a lot of, a lot of shortcomings in a lot of other areas. Dick his prose seems to me to be flat, affectless, jagged, in a way that I'm only going to put up with that if you're doing something great on the page, and he absolutely isn't. So I know that flies in the face of all of his fans. Last Page says, what book would you recommend on the Spanish Civil War? I've read a few, but I don't know the subject well enough to recommend one. Or the English Civil War. Well, that's easy, but it's more than one book. It's C.V. Wedgwood, who did a book called The King's Peace, a big, thick thing called The King's Peace, then The King's War, which is about the war itself, and then the final slim coda volume, A Coffin for King Charles. So kind of a trilogy, and I cannot recommend them strongly enough. They're so good. Even after all this, they're like 60 years old, 70 years old. They're still fantastic. Just fantastic. Let's see here. Ian Methvin says, Thomas Hardy, do you think he was a better poet than a novelist, or vice versa? I think he would probably prefer to be remembered as a poet rather than as a novelist. I think you're probably right about that. I have always preferred him as a poet to a novelist. John Garganarakis says, you mentioned in an earlier video that you planned on revisiting Kazantzakis' The Last Temptation of Christ for maybe Midrash. Did you get around to it yet? And if so, what were your first impressions? Yeah, I read the paperback that I found and liked it a whole lot more. The problem that I had with I had that old mass market paperback that a lot of you probably know the book from that paperback. And I forget right now, I don't have it with me, I forget right now the name of the translator, but I often felt in the course of rereading that book, that was the edition that I read the first time, I often felt that the translator was in the way. I don't know how to quantify that, I don't know really how to define that, but that sense has grown sharper over the decades as I've read much more translated work. And that bell was ringing the whole time that I was reading that book, is that there might be a lot more going on here that I'm seeing because of the translator. Again, I don't know that I can put my finger on exactly why, but that's the impression I get. I meant, we're at the end of May, I meant to look around for maybe another English translation. I just haven't done that. I'm perfectly happy to let that quest spill over the bounds of maybe Midrash. Let's see here. The Thing That Should Not Be has a barrage of questions. Let's see. Number one, how did you become the sexy 28-year-old influencer that we see before us? Care to share some of your gym routine, or is that a trade secret? It's just clean living, son. Number two, what do you think about the SCP Foundation? Have you read any of the stories, and if so, do you think that they are good, bad, or average? I realize the taboo of asking a have you read question, however, I feel I can get away with it, as it is not about an actual book, but rather an internet phenomenon. I think it's absolutely fascinating. The Foundation, all the stuff. Good Lord, the website alone is a huge Grand Canyon of time you can lose. I don't think I haven't read everything on it, obviously. I don't think I've ever read anything on it that was technically any good. But it's all so fascinating. All of it is so fascinating and so unprecedented in the world of online literature that I didn't care. I don't think you're supposed to care when you're there. So now you've got me wanting to end this Q&A and go and explore around some more, see what's new. Number three, what do you think of the works of R. Scott Becker, particularly his Prince of Nothing trilogy? I've heard incredibly mixed reviews, but yours is the only opinion I will trust. Is the book series worth reading? I've heard those mixed opinions too. I've heard some of those mixed opinions be soaring praise for these things. I think they're dead on the page. Some of the opinions that say otherwise over the years have been so passionate and so knowledgeable about what's going on in the books that I have a kernel of self-doubt. I think it's only a kernel of self-doubt. I think you will end up feeling that you have wasted a large amount of time. So I would say give it 100 pages. Give the first volume 100 pages. If the author's doing something you like, well, he's going to do that for a long time, so you'll be fine. If he's not, it's not going to get any better, and I have plenty of alternative recommendations for you. Mike Curry says, what is your opinion on the books by Sebastian Gorka? As a treat for us, can you rant about him too? Thank you for all the book recommendations and discussions. I could certainly rant about Gorka for a long time. It is a particularly perverse thing when someone wants to have the distinction of being the most evil person in Trump world. It's particularly perverse for someone to want that, not only because you shouldn't want to have a reputation as the most evil person anywhere, but also because there's such a huge amount of competition that I won't go on a full-blown rant. His books are completely worthless. And so is he. Let's see here. Sleepy Channel says, hi, I got the Norton edition of Tale of Genji. Any good blurbs on it? But I've yet to start reading it. Any chance for a read-along on your channel? I've had many people, I've had many people request a read-along of Genji. And I am really tempted to do it, because any good reason that I have to reread the whole thing is fine by me, and that would be a great reason. I will seriously think of it. I think it's 10 years now since the crew at Open Letters Monthly did Summer of Genji. But that was just a website. That was just writing. It might be time to do that again. With, of course, the Dennis Washburn translation. Let's see here. Leo Percara says, hello, Steve. Do you like The Long Ships by Franz Gunnar Brunson and the movie? I don't particularly care for the movie, but I like the book. I'd love to see a new translation of the book. Again, talking about the translator in the room. I'd love to see a new translation. The book is not stodgy. The famous English language translation is, which leads me to think we could have another one. And with all the interest currently in all things Nordic, I don't know why there isn't one. Maybe there isn't. I just don't know about it. I've only read the English language translation that took America by storm 60 years ago. That's the only one I've read. Is there any other Viking novel/movie adaptation that you know of and like? Why, there's one that came up during David Murphy's visit. The 13th Warrior. John McTiernan's movie adaptation of Michael Crichton's book, The Eaters of the Dead. Book is not worth your time, but The 13th Warrior, if you haven't seen it, you should. Let's just put it that way. You should. Joel Swagman says, it's a pity you don't have time to listen to podcasts. I'd love to recommend Mike Duncan's 2 podcasts, The History of Rome and Revolutions. Well, I'll make a note of it, but I never do it. I just never. I do technically have all the time in the world, but I just don't do it. The time that I'm using for that could be used to read or to talk to Frida. But what did you think of Mike Duncan's 2 books, The Storm Before the Storm and Hero of Two Worlds? The Storm Before the Storm especially I really liked. I like him as a writer. Faisal Hadi says, Steve, is Walter Hamada the big power broker in movie studios that you're referring to for the Flash movie character? Nope. Aberami says, what did you think of the international Booker winner, Tomb of Sand? I just bought it and don't really know what to expect. I thought it was brilliant. It broke one of my own rules. I usually don't reach out of my own remit. My own little bailiwick is American publishing. In this case, I did, and I'm glad that I did. It's an undertaking. You say you're not sure what to make of it, not sure what to expect. It's an undertaking. It's a serious book. But I think you'll find it worthwhile. I think you will. Definitely go into it with your knees nice and limber, because the author has a very strict cadence, a very individual cadence. And there's no use at all going into a book where an author has made that decision, that conscious decision, and saying, well, I want it to be a different cadence. No, you have to adapt yourself. That's part of why we pay these people to write things we can't write. Go in limber for that. You have to have that in mind when you're reading it. But if you do, I think you'll find it rewarding. I wonder if it'll get an American version, or if it has one already that I just don't know about. I don't think it does. Let's see here. Scott Tippin says, what is your top 5 favorite books shops from all of your travels? Assuming we all know number 1. Well, yeah, it's number 1, but I don't have any answers to this kind of question. I never went to bookshops when I was traveling. Maybe I would pop into a landmark like Shakespeare and Company, but I never went in shopping. I had books with me, and I was not going to accumulate any at all, not at all. So I never did it. I would never have developed that list. Let's see here. Lee In says, could you explain how, what, and why you annotate? Maybe make a video on it as you did with your journals if it's something that you have lots of thoughts and insights on. Well, there are 3 different things that I go for in my annotation. One is purely factual, just demotic details. When does Aunt Lulu show up? Because you don't know whether or not she's going to become popular. And if you're 300 pages in, you're going to be looking for her to appear. You're going to be paging back forever, unless you're using an ebook, in which case you can simply ask it where Aunt Lulu first appears, and it will tell you in a fraction of a second. So that's one. It's just factual stuff like that. What is the name of the company where the main character works? That sort of thing. You're going to need that in a review, and you know you are. So you might as well note it. Otherwise, you're just going to end up hunting for it. You might as well note all that stuff. It usually occurs in the first 100 pages. All of that stuff does, usually. So that's one thing. Second thing is I'm looking for passages. A single line, a single phrase, or a couple of lines in a block. Also for review purposes. I know that I'm going to need that as well. Once I get to the writing of the review, I'm going to need to give my reader a sense of what the book reads like. So they're not just taking my word for it. I'm going to have to give them a longer chunk, maybe 2. I'm going to have to give them a few shorter things so the author comes up with a really neat phrase, something like that. And then the third thing is really memorable lines, the type of thing that people used to put in commonplace books, where it's not anything you're necessarily going to use for a review. It's just an extract that you really liked, and you want to have it separate somewhere. So it's those three. The first two are mainly for reviews. Tom Allison says, "Hey Steve, do you have a book recommendation for Roman military tactics and/or campaign history? Thanks, forever a fan." It would depend on the level that you're looking for. I know I hate "it depends" as an answer, but this is an email question. I have many, many such recommendations. It would depend on what kind of level you're getting into. I mean, at the very beginning level would be all of those little white, thin Osprey paperbacks that break down the military details, the uniforms, the equipment, the troop arrangement, the camp arrangements. Those little Osprey paperbacks are fantastic, and there have been thousands of them now. So every single time period of Rome has been covered. Every single one, no matter how small it is. There are a ton of those out there, I'm sure. That would be a great place to start. And a lot of those are so well done that they are also not just a place to start. A lot of them will also appeal if you're further down the line in terms of detail and knowledge. There are lots of others too. Feel free to email me. Let's see here. Kyle Waddell says, "What is the best biography of Franklin Roosevelt?" H.W. Brands, I'd say, as a book, just to, one volume, one stop biography. I'd say that probably H.W. Brands, which, if I remember correctly, has a wonderful blurb on it. Sean G. says, "Sir, you said in an earlier video that the U.S. was on the wrong side in World War II. I have never said anything like that. You are misremembering. I was wondering why you believe it and if you can expand on it. I don't believe anything of the kind, and I can't expand on it. Therefore, I've never said anything remotely like that. I don't know who you're thinking of, but it wasn't me." Alan Black says, "I am thinking of buying Edward Gibbon's Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. Is this a worthwhile investment, or is there a more up-to-date definitive history that supersedes Gibbon's?" See, this is the thing that I bring up on these videos. I don't understand why people look at history that way. If somebody in the 21st century were to write a novel about an orphan trying to find his way in the world, no one would think to ask if it supersedes Henry Fielding's Tom Jones. No one would think to ask that. I don't know why we ask it with history. I understand. We have fetishized the idea that this historian have the latest material. Has there been a new archive opened or new letters found or something like that? But history, if it's done right, is also an art on its own, a kind of writing on its own, a prose exercise on its own. I don't know why people don't see that with history when they do with every other kind of writing. The later histories of the decline and fall of the Roman Empire, first of all, no one's ever done it on the scale that Gibbon did, and no one ever will. But the books that touch on that subject, the books that describe that subject, don't supersede him in any way, any more than their successors will supersede them. What I'm trying to say is you shouldn't go to history for the very latest dispatches. That denudes it of a lot of its power as a kind of writing, is what I'm saying. Historians should aspire to more than just being the very latest dispatches. And the more we fetishize that, the more we let them off the hook for writing boring books. Gibbon is fantastic. He is a fantastic reading experience. Are you actually going to care that when he was writing his book in the 1770s, he was unaware of an inscription from the reign of Gratian that came to light in the early 1930s? Are you really going to care about that? And does it change a million-word narrative? It does not. I would say the answer to both those questions is no. So you should definitely buy and read Gibbon. Absolutely. Get the Wormersley translation, the Wormersley edition, in 3 fat volumes from Penguin Classic. There's never been a better Gibbon edition than David Wormersley. So either get the 3 big trade paperbacks of the classic Black Spine Penguin Classics, or before that there was a beautiful box set of heavy hardcovers with lovely inscription artwork all around it. I don't have that trilogy right now. It's fairly bulky, but if you're not going to do an ebook, then do Wormersley as paperback. Let's see here. Eternex49 says, "Could you suggest where to start with Elizabethan plays, obviously apart from Shakespeare?" Okay, I can. Elizabethan's a bit of a stretch. We'd have to go into the Jacobean period too. I would say Middleton, Thomas Middleton, The Changeling. The Changeling is very much worth your time to read. But I don't like how much work that obviously is doing. How much of Shakespeare have you read? And how deeply have you read Shakespeare? One of the greatest, most important writers in any language, in any culture, in any time period, anywhere in the history of humanity. Do you know his works? Not just I can recite the plot development of Tamerlane or whatever, but do you know them? Do you know Titus Andronicus? Do you know Macbeth? Do you know Shakespeare? If you don't, I said Tamerlane because, of course, Christopher Marlowe is hovering over the story, and you should know his plays as well. But I've often found that when people ask this, who other than Shakespeare, they don't have any right to ask that question. Shakespeare should come first by a wide margin, and not just for his period. But anyway, you didn't want a lecture, now did you? Let's see here. Faisal Hadi is back. Wish my name were Faisal. Faisal's such an awesome name. I wish my name were Faisal. Number one. Let's see here. Were you ever a dude, bro? No, I was never a dude, bro. I have known them many times, but I've never penned one. No. Number two. What do you think I think you meant to write will happen to Amber Heard and Johnny Depp's careers. Will the deal makers that you talked about in a Steve stream about star power destroy their careers, or will their fandoms increase like Michael Jackson? Okay, but look at what you did. You answer your own question. I believe that Michael Jackson's future is what is coming to both of them. But Michael Jackson stopped being a musician. He became a freak. He became a pop culture freak. That's what this trial is doing to these two. Can you even conceive? Let's leave Amber Heard out of this for a minute. Can you even conceive of Johnny Depp getting a serious acting job ever again? He is a public spectacle. Maybe that won't stay true. The 21st century has no ability to remember anything at all. So maybe that amnesia will work. Maybe he'll be in some action franchise down the line. But I can't picture it. They've made spectacles of themselves. That's what will happen. It won't be a deal maker that'll have to do it. They're doing it themselves. Anyway, let's see here. Number three. Steve, what was the biggest pack of dogs at any one time did you travel with? It would have been in the Middle East somewhere. Oh my. Well, it was a large amount. The size of it varied because I always had my dogs, but then I would take in whatever dogs I could find. If they're lounging around, scrounging for scraps, dodging traffic. A lot of Americans travel only to very Americanized places, so they don't see dog populations like that, but dog populations like that are everywhere. At least they were when I traveled. And they weren't going to be that way while I was there. They had to go right back to that life, but for at least a little while, they could experience what they should experience every day. Plentiful food, wonderful, comfortable bath, plenty of water, face smooching, all of it. They got to experience all of that. And there were places in the Middle East where there was a large crowd. I would take them all. I would just call them all to join in, come along. We'll find food for everybody. We'll find resting places for everybody. We'll find water to clean everybody and quench every thirst and all that sort of thing. I don't remember the exact number, and I don't remember exactly where it was, but it would have been the Middle East. And number four, is there a book that presents all the background story in the publishing industry? Not that I know of. Love it if there were, but no. And a request, Steve, may you stream once a week. That's a good idea, isn't it? James Holder says, what do you think of fiction published by university presses? I usually don't like it. Do you? I think you're asking because you probably sense that it's a systemic weakness. At least that's what I think. I think it's a systemic weakness. I just don't think the people that are doing the picking are in any position to do that picking. Let's see here. Jonathan McKnight says, do you have a favorite musician or band? Once again, for the cheap seats. All John Philip Sousa, all the time. Chrisam70 says, do you have a favorite ebook format? I.e. Apple, Kobo, Nook, Amazon. So the format of the e-reader? You're naming devices here, not formats. Format, of course, like everybody else, I would go with EPUB. Which means that, Apple, Kobo, and Nook can all take it natively. But if you want to read an EPUB on an Amazon device, you have to convert it. To use Calibre, or you have to use a free conversion site somewhere to convert it to Mobi. And then you can read it perfectly fine on Amazon. That doesn't break the coding. It doesn't break the book. Everything will still come through, even the cover. You just have to convert it. And I do that for all of my books, but it's a little bit of a headache. It's a little bit of a first world problem. So usually I just stick with EPUB. The only problem being that I mean, EPUB is universal. Everybody does it. It is the USB-C type for book formats. The only reason Amazon doesn't do it is so that they can have a proprietary format to goose their own profits. And the only problem with that, otherwise you just, ordinarily in a situation like that, you just say, all right, well, there's plenty of competition, so see you later. But Amazon knows that they make the best reading devices, the best physical e-reading devices. They know that they do. So you end up converting somebody. You end up doing it. Let's see here. EternX49 says, are you familiar with Guido Cavalcanti and Arnaud Daniel? Yes. Why? Derek says, hello, Steve. My son is right now going through conversion therapy, and it is really hard on us. Do you have any advice on how we can cope with this as parents? Is this a joke? Is this a trick question? I must be reading this wrong. Okay, well, let's just go with the question on the surface. I'm sure there's something going on here that I don't understand. Do I have any advice on how you can cope with your son going through conversion therapy as his parents? Yes, I do. Pull him out of conversion therapy right now. As soon as you hear this sentence, pull him out of conversion therapy. Pull him out of it. Get him out of it. It is pseudoscience. It is not real. It will only do harm, usually extreme harm, and in a huge number of cases, suicidal harm. So I don't know what prompted this decision, whether it was yours or his or somebody else's, but end it right away. You are. If you want I must be understanding something wrong about this question, but reading the question just at face value, if you're the boy's parents, get him out of conversion therapy right away. It does not work. It is not real. It is only damaging. It is only damaging. There must be something going on there. Let's just move on. Philip Jonkin says, Steve, can you tell a funny joke? Oh, I don't really do jokes. I love being funny. When David Murphy was over here for his wonderful visit, there was a lot of belly laughing that happened, but it wasn't from jokes. I don't know jokes at all. The best I can do with canned jokes is something like, why did the monkey fall out of the tree? Because it was dead. You give me a circumstance, I will probably make you laugh, but not with a joke. Anyway, Mac says, number one, what do you think about Mark Zuckerberg's obsession with Augustus? What can I say about it that hasn't been said many times before? It would be funny if he weren't one of the most powerful people in the world. That makes it a little creepy. A lot more than a little creepy. Number two, in what manner and time span do you predict American democracy to erode? Well, I've already gone over this subject on this channel. No one likes to hear it, and everyone thinks that I'm being hyperbolic. We have very little time left. Very little time left. Even for the illusion of it. The illusion will be ripped apart completely when the half of the country that doesn't vote Republican suddenly realizes that their candidates aren't winning anyway, even though they get the majority. Because the officials in charge of registering and authenticating the votes are fascist party loyalists. They have just wormed their way into that position in almost every state in the Union. They are fascist Trump supporters who have vowed, who got that job by explicitly vowing that no Democrat would win on their watch, no matter what. Any Democrat victory, you've heard this yourself from everyone in Trump world, every Democratic victory is fraudulent. Now, you know that's not true. Imagine a country in which, even though you know that's not true, that is the operating principle of who gets the job and who doesn't. And if you don't feel like imagining that, you don't have to wait too long before you won't have to imagine it. So when you say how long and in what manner, that's the manner, and it's already happened. Those people already are in their jobs. And they're backed up by private militia on their private chat groups that say, if you get any trouble, we'll kill the people who are giving you trouble. No Democrat's going to win in this district or in this state. To the limited extent that that isn't a clean sweep in 2022, it will be a clean sweep in 2024. So I don't know what to tell you. I guess you have the luxury of just saying that I'm wrong, that I'm exaggerating. Certainly I hope I'm wrong. Let's just move on to a happier question, shall we? Number three, what's your favorite scene in Ben-Hur? Okay. Well, I know that it should be the chariot race, right? That's everybody's favorite. It is one of the greatest scenes in cinematic history. But for me, it's right before that. It's the Sheik, Ilderim. Ben-Hur meets a sheikh who wants to introduce Ben-Hur to his children. They're in the tent. They're in his tent, and he wants to introduce Ben-Hur to his children. And the curtain opens, and his children are Arabian stallions who come into the room at his beck, and he talks to them by name. And it's amazing. To my mind, it is far more magical than the chariot race scene. I remember watching that in the theater and being just stunned at the quiet, knowing grace of that moment, of how magical it was. So I'm going to say that, the horse scene. Then J. Scott Phillips says, I always find myself in awe of how fast you read. If you did nothing else, you would read just as fast. And nowadays, even as the walls of Hyde Cottage burst with books in the thousands, you seem comfortably acclimated to e-reading. Very much so, yes. So I'm curious, after just a few pages of a mammoth such as War and Peace, does the progress display at the bottom of your screen say something like 1 hour, 12 minutes left of the book? I try to get rid of those displays. Like I mentioned in this Q&A, I don't want somebody reading over my shoulder. I try to get rid of those things. But I do go through ebooks just as fast as I do printed books. So I don't. Yeah, I've talked to e-readers who look down at that kind of assessment that's going on at the bottom of an ebook, and it seems never to move at all. That doesn't happen with me. And finally, we'll end up here. We'll end up at the 30-minute mark here with Ann P., and then we'll be done. So this is 4 videos, I think. Hi, Steve. Congrats. As a non-American, I honestly wonder, does a female equivalent to a dude bro exist? Even a non-binary one, perhaps. This already came up. Female dude bros already came up. It would certainly not be a non-binary one, since no living organism in the history of the world has ever been non-binary. But I'm assuming you meant that as a joke. I don't think that any female dude bros exist. I've never encountered them. It's all about dad, so it would be a totally different thing. I don't know what I'd call it, but I don't think I've ever encountered one. And something different. I have come a long way in getting over my fear of dogs. Oh, you're afraid of my babies. Oh. I even met some that I really like. But my lizard brain still takes over when they bark unexpectedly. Any tips? First tip of all, most important thing is don't beat yourself up. Don't be so hard on yourself. Like you mentioned, it's a basal response in you. It's a lizard brain response. You can't change those. No one can change those. What you can do is exercise sovereignty over them. You can exercise executive control over them. If you make the goal to get rid of that lizard brain response, you're going to beat yourself up all the time because it's not going anywhere. But you know what it is, right? It is a lizard brain response. Well, you have lots of other brain as well. You have also ape brain at the front. And it is in charge. You can control even basal brain things like that. Since you know what it is, you know the response it's going to have, just train yourself to moderate it, to control it. Your brain should tell you whether or not that lizard brain response to a barking dog is justified. With every human being on Earth, other than me, that response will sometimes be justified. Right? Your lizard brain is more often right than wrong. So don't beat yourself up that it is still flaring off these warnings. Just use the driver's seat brain to say, all right, I had that reaction and I don't like it, but is it warranted in this case? It most often won't be. Most dogs are, even the ones that bark unexpectedly, are not a danger to you. And your lizard brain is responding to only the outward look of something that might be dangerous. But you have the ability to override that. You have the ability, you can't get rid of it, but you have the ability to control it. Right? People have basal lizard brain reactions to all kinds of things. It's a mark of being an adult that you're able to control that. You're able to say, all right, well, I'm having this reaction, but I know that it doesn't make any sense. So I'm not going to let it rule my actions. I'm glad that you're making progress. It feels so weird to me. My lizard brain does not do that. My lizard brain does not give me that reaction to dogs when they bark unexpectedly or otherwise. But I'm hoping that you keep finding friendly dogs. I mean, no matter what your lizard brain is saying to you, if you see a friendly dog, go up. Say hi. Squat down to their eye level and smooch with them. The more reflexes like that you have, the easier it will be to override your initial reaction, which You should override because they're wonderful people. But anyway, we're wrapping up on a dog note. That's good. That is the end of our 12.6K Q&A. I think we probably have at least a week until we're doing this again. That's good. So I'll wrap this up for now. Once again, this was a ton of fun. Thank you all for doing this. And I will see you in my normal videos. Thank you, BookTube.